Well, okay. Richard Barton asks, I'm struggling with ammonia as a potential future fuel. It's a nasty substance which are odds with improving the situation, safety and sea pollution, etc. Would you like to pick that one up?
Yep. No, it's a very good question. Firstly, let's look at why ammonia is being considered. Because of its mix of energy density compared to, say, hydrogen, and its cost, its levelized cost of production. You've got your hydrogen, then you're just putting in your nitrogen element into it. So actually, it's in terms of, and that's why it's being looked at, energy density and cost and the mix of those two. But in terms of safety and pollution, there are challenges there. In terms of pollution, first of all, sea pollution, yes, if there is a leakage into the sea, it can be very damaging. We're currently doing a research project looking at that, and we hope to make those findings public very soon. And that's coming on the back of some other projects we're doing. It doesn't have a carbon element, so in terms of pollution, that bit's a positive bit, let's not forget that. In terms of safety, out of all the fuels, it is the most concerning. It's toxic, it's very toxic, and it's also explosive. So if we break those two down, and toxicity is a major part, a leakage of ammonia can have catastrophic events, not just for the ship, but also the surrounding area. And this is why we're doing a project at the moment with the Mercer McKinley Miller Centre for Zero Carbon Shipping, doing an ammonia quantitative risk assessment. And when we look at ammonia as a fuel, what we've looked across the last 3 decades of ammonia safety across all the industries. The process industry is very good. They're handling 80% of ammonia. But when you look at something like the food and beverage industry, there's a lot of incidents and fatalities there over the past 3 decades. And we've got to get that balance. Where does shipping sit into this? We're not process safety. We're probably more akin to the food industry. But we need to get to the level of the process industry. So there's a lot of work to be done there. We're working on it. But yeah, it certainly we can't be complacent about ammonia.
JJ, presumably you've got some standards on explosives and things which you just bring into play. Is there an implication for the MOD as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's huge complexities for us to deal with. Not least the points that have just been outlined there, but of course, the fact that we, mix it up with both sensitive and insensitive munitions in a safe way, clearly from a ship design perspective, but then we put it closer to the enemy as well. So yeah, some more challenges definitely.
And Charlotte, you're facing this, and also I noticed that I think Hamburg and Amsterdam are looking at building hydrogen storage. How are you addressing that?
Yes, absolutely. I think we're behind the curve. It's safe to say, but we are actively being approached by hydrogen production organisations wanting to base sites at the port. For me, it's about making sure that it's the experts. It's making sure that the processing, the management, the containment is absolutely, we involve the experts in that. Yeah. As a port authority, we need to know where our limitations are. Yeah. And I think that's really important. That's why we need to work together as an industry to be able to do that and make sure that it's actively available, but actually we're doing it in a consistent way, in a managed way, a regulated way, ultimately for the sector, and making it available.
It comes back to our point to the MCA, is it would be worth embedding people in the industry in order to make sure that actually we start to get it right from the beginning, rather than turn up and say, here's a new ship, regulate it, and you get sent home.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next question is from Tim, actually. Paul Scott, can the current environment of high freight rates, high oil price, wider societal benefits, pressurize to decarbon break the super cycle?
Yeah, okay, so can current high freight rates, high oil price and societal pressure. Okay, high freight rates, I think there was a spike, it's already gone. When I was setting some coursework this week, the Clarksey earnings for some ship types has gone negative. In other words, it's not even covering ship owners' capital costs at the moment. So we had a spike, so not really the freight rate spike. High oil price is going to change a lot. But we have been before, as recently as 2011, in a situation where the two big cost drivers for a ship owner, capital cost and fuel cost, flipped. First time it had ever happened was the last time we had $140 a barrel in 2011. And so we've already been in the situation where they flipped. If it stays at that, of course, it's going to put pressure on decarbonisation to reduce costs. But the really interesting one there from Tim's question is the societal pressure. And can we, that would be a great help. Can we get people to acknowledge that paying shipping's complete rock bottom prices, which require shipping to operate on mazout, on horrible old fuel oil, means the extra 50 cents you add to what you're buying. The example I give to students is, I haven't got training shoes on, their training shoes, you know, they leave Hong Kong having cost $5 to make. They get to Northumberland Street here in Newcastle and they cost you £100. How much is the shipping element of that? It's about 5 cents. So can we get societal pressure to get people to value shipping more? Absolutely, I would say. So that would be, we've already seen precedent for what economists don't like, which is split markets. So you pay more now for a ship with a scrubber than without a scrubber, by actually quite a lot. So if we put societal pressure through the shops that this television has come here on a ship that hasn't damaged the environment, I absolutely think that pressure would be a valuable thing in our pursuit.
So it's a combination of economic, legislative, and then social pressures that come to bear together.
And in fact, that leads to the next question from Patrick Carney. What could we do to expand the research of this shipbuilding economics and share the knowledge across the industry?
Okay, so I've presented this research to the JCU, that's the senior executives of the industries of Japan, Europe, China, Korea, United States. Oh, it's all very interesting, but nobody's doing anything. OECD think it's fabulous, but can't do anything. It's been done particularly to help the latest suit against Korea to stop dumping ships in World Trade Organization. Maybe it'll help that work. So people find it interesting, but so far, everyone sees it as good sense. Shipping doesn't like it because shipping is completely addicted, those who know what they're doing, to this cycle. So I have struggled. I've had lots and lots of interest, but I have struggled. For example, we could do the proper forecast. Well, shipbrokers don't want to do that because that would be influencing the market. The OECD is very nervous to be involved in actually forecasting themselves because they can't influence the market. So at the moment, I'm down to telling people about it, so at least we know it's happening. But actually what we need to do about it, the really interesting one would be the red light to go on when the investment in ships is out of kilter with the rational demand for seaborne trade. That would do great things, but nobody actually wants to do that. Who would do it is the problem.
Exactly.
So, frankly, not a lot of progress made so far, apart from interesting people.
Thanks. The next question is from Bernard Toomey. Manufacturers will produce a specific safety case, an insurance case. Who will produce the overall safety case? So I think this is going to progress really from embedding and developing the initial safety case, and this is coming to Lloyd's Register because this is your area.
Well, it's in Lloyd's Register's remit. It's probably outside of mine a little bit, but I think it also comes on with what Brian Johnson was talking about as well, is as we move forward into looking at safety cases and new methods of risk assurance, is we have to look at this with a new set of glasses of how do we take these safety cases and move forward. So it's a conversation ongoing. But there's a lot more we can do and should do in that area. We need to accelerate it from a regulatory point to enable those first movers to move forwards and quickly.
How does that apply to the mod, JJ? In that, in the early days, a lot of new technology came in through We Want 8 and We Won't Wait for the dreadnoughts, and I've certainly seen diesel electric come from submarines into the system. So how will the mod fit in with this? Is there work you can do outside the regulation, or are you now tied into the regulation? How does it work?
Well, I think we obviously maintain some of our own regulators in-house, and obviously we reach out to the broader areas as well. The Maritime Regulator, the Defence Maritime Regulator, works closely with MCA to ensure that there's an equivalence of the regulatory frameworks that are in place. But the safety case processes are no different. You know, they're either goal structured or they're based around a logical argument either in terms of a split of safe to operate safely, in order that we can generate sufficient evidence. I mean, the bigger question, I think, for us is the tolerance or appetite for risk against the operational demand and requirement overall, and getting that balance is set down to experienced operators and engineers.
Yeah.
And
Do you want
if I
to
may
come in?
just
Just
add
gonna
to that,
stand up
I
so
think
I
one
can
of the
see any questions.
challenges we've got as a port is that the regulations aren't necessarily up to date and keeping up to date and up to speed with the technology and the environment which we're working. So even as simple things as fertiliser actually is a challenge for us as a port, because actually the insurers are, gosh, high risk. Well, goodness me, when we start putting ammonia and hydrogen on our ports, we're going to have all sorts of challenges. And we can't operate if we haven't got insurance. And so we absolutely need the industry to keep pace with the technology and the world in which we're now operating in. I think that's key.
I mean, I'd agree, certainly from running a naval base, complex industrial site, multiple hazards on site, warship and harbour safety case around explosive handling, for example. We have to put people into those roles who can actually own and understand that broad set of risks, but also then be comfortable that as we introduce new technologies and new opportunities, and the work we've been doing with our feasibility study over a hydrogen plant in Portsmouth, for example, in the centre of a town, a city, but we have to be comfortable that we are able to conceptualise and then develop and intellectualise the arguments as we go forward. So I think we're no different, and certainly the work we've been doing around decarbonising ports at a sector level with KTM has been really helpful, I think, for me to understand and then share that knowledge across the sector.
I'm just going to make sure there's not a question out in the audience that anyone wants to... Yes, one in the front there.
Thank you very much. Sorry for not being able to pass the question through the system. Stavros Karaperidis from Plymouth University. Great presentations. Thank you very much for all the rest. The question is to the triple helix that you mentioned earlier, social, economy, and response to the environment. I think it's coming from the industry. We have near sourcing. A lot of companies like IKEA and others, they're moving the production from China to Turkey. So we're halving the distance. And don't forget that shipping is derived demand. So if there is no need for shipping, we're not going to have the same environmental impact. So if we move from 12,000 nautical miles to 6,000 nautical miles, or even 3,000 nautical miles between production and consumption, then you're solving the problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other in the audience, comments or questions? Just make sure...
Could just make a comment on...
yeah, certainly, yes.
Stavros Karaperidis said there. Martin Stopford, shipping guru, has pointed out that we could halve commercial shipping's output overnight by reducing speed. There's a cubic relationship between fuel consumption and speed. If you reduce from 14 knots to 9, you halve your fuel consumption. So actually, the answer may well be in logistics and markets. Well, there is no answer. Part of the solution is going to be in logistics and markets.
And we've got Mike Mansell. Defence can achieve its primary aim of advantage over the enemy. Is there a danger that net zero pressurises the military away from its primary aim? Probably a simple answer to that.
Does anybody else want to comment? Well, I think, Mike, that was the point I made, really. Defence needs to both protect its ability to deliver that outcome, but also work in the legislative framework of a net zero national framework. We are an instrument of the state. We follow the rules and the laws of the state, unless, of course, we decide that the journey starts here with the creation of the exemption case for defence not to be able to operate within that framework overall. And that, I think, back to the spectrum of views that exist both, inter and intra defence, that is going to continue to be, I think, some of the argument that's out there.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
No, but I think just coming back to the previous audience statement as well, in terms of shipping is nearly a sort of own enemy in that side, that particularly on container ships, on the container side, is the reduction of cost of shipping has come down so much that it is more cost competitive. And you've seen probably on Facebook and other things of, the pears caught in Mexico, packaged in Thailand and shipped back to America, or Scottish prawns being handpicked, being sort of packaged in China, then shipped back when you're buying Scottish prawns. So there are those parts, but as we see, and it'll be interesting to see as fuels become more expensive, is how will that dynamic change? Will it be more cost competitive to have items made over in China then shipped, or will it be more cost competitive to produce it locally? Because that is why we have a global economy, is where's it cheapest to build it and then transport it, that whole life cycle, and that is coming into it.
Well, that's an interesting debate, because I remember in a previous incarnation in British Marine, Sunseeker did all those sums and didn't transfer the manufacturing to China, because not only was it shipping costs, it was also quality assurance as well. And I see Oyster have bought boats back as well, manufacturing back as well. So it's an interesting debate. I think probably in the interest of finishing a little bit early, we've got one more question. David Cooper, we talked a lot about minimising the difficulties associated with decarbonisation. Beyond the CO2 reduction, do the panel envisage any benefits of clean maritime? Do you want to start?
Yeah, well, yes, I will.
Well done,
I mean,
you move first.
There's huge benefits in clean maritime. I mean, I don't think any of us would ever sit here and argue against it. It's got to be something we do. The challenge is, who's going to pay for it? Is it the end consumer? And we talked about green. Ultimately, there is a cost to this. The consumer, for their trainers, has to ultimately pay more in order for us to get there. So the benefits absolutely are there, I think, without doubt. And we could talk about that from shipping all the way through to transport on the roads as well. The benefits are there, but I think the key factor is somebody has to pay. And I think we need to work that out as a sector, as an industry, to work out where and how do we manage that between us.
Well, I think also in most of the change, and I think all the panel talked a bit about this, is the most rigorous change is driven by legislation.
Yes.
And so if you want to, and you're going to have to legislate probably along these lines. Paul,
Problem is, for international shipping, you can't legislate unless the ship owners want it, because the IMO can only act if enough of the flag states agree. So fitting scrubbers, NOx and SOx, that wasn't determined by IMO, that was determined by local legislation in Europe and the United States particularly. So local legislation, okay, might help.
Yeah.
If we were to say no one can come into the Tyne who's burning the Zoot, then that would be great.
I think local legislation can be a driver as well as regional legislation. I think what we've got to be really important that it's scalable legislation. The SECA zones are a very good example where it was taken from one place and that same model was applied over in America and in some parts of Asia as well. The big concern is if it's not scalable or if it's adopted differently. So we can go on to ballast water management systems, which are completely different, where the IMO had one system, the US Coast Guard had another, and the whole system failed because the technology couldn't meet it halfway. So regional, ideally, shipping's in a perfect position where it's governed by one governing body, the IMO, and that should give it, but then it's again, victim of its own success. You have so many members to agree. But if we can get the regional policy to be scalable so it can be applied in one area, then scaled up, then that would be the most positive way of moving it forward at the moment.
A miracle, I think.
Except the IMO only really governs safety and pollution.
Yeah.
It has no teeth. I mean, it's tried to sort out scrapping. Scandalous bit of our industry with the Hong Kong Convention. It can't get, it'll raise the price of scrapping ships. So if the ship owners don't agree, the IMO can do nothing. So the IMO is actually quite weak in this. But
there's an example of where regional legislation, European ship recycling requirements, have played out in a similar sort of way. So, it'll be about, the social conscience of the regional or local organisations setting that framework and driving change.
Last question from Damien Bloor. Paul, do you think there is any way that there could be interventions that would enable new construction supply to be matched with the demand?
Yes. Where's Damien? Was that your curveball, Damien? Well, we have to make it not easily, that's for sure. So number one, shipbuilding has to be brought within the ambit of World Trade Organization. So if somebody is misbehaving and preserving capacity that should economically go, they can't preserve it without sanctions. It's not possible at the moment. The real way that we could do that, though, is with this leading indicator. So the driver of demand is not shipping. The driver of demand is investment in ships. So ships are unique economically, one, because of the volatility that produces so much opportunity if you invest in a ship, if you know what you're doing. Two, very few barriers to entry if you want to buy a ship. And three, that your means of production is tradable. So people don't invest in capacity to move cargoes, they invest in a tradable commodity, basically. So we have to persuade the finance industry when that investment isn't good. So that's where the proper forecasting and the red light coming on to saying that the justification for the ship in terms of its rational demand isn't there. So nothing directly, we aren't going to regulate by ordering shipyards to be closed, but we could improve it to stop the money piling in. That would be the key to do it.
Thank you. I think probably we're going to draw stumps there. We've got dinner later on tonight. The thing that springs to my mind is a military quote, actually. A chap called Liddell Hart once wrote about the military. The only thing more difficult than getting a new idea into the military mind is getting the old ideas out. And I think we've seen a bit of that going on throughout the whole of the day. But it has been a very good day. I think there's massive food for thought, plenty of optimism around, and all we need now is a bit of determination, a bit more optimism, and push on with the opportunity that's been presented to us. But before we go, I'd just like to say thank you very much to the panel, and thank you for their presentations and their thoughts. Thank you.